quick note before things get started. While I will be addressing certain issues that I have in some of the reporting that has gone on with everything, and also some of the incredibly messy issues in regards to conflicting stories around some of this, I do not wish anyone to take anything contained in this as an attempt to defend Ezra Miller from any of the allegations I'm going to be talking about. I'm trying to add full context and as much nuance as I feel the issue warrants, but none of this is intended to defend them. So I'd really appreciate not being accused of that. Here we go. Okay, so Ezra Miller's problems have taken a turn for the with fresh allegations. If you don't remember what went on with them before, you can check out the video I did back in April. But short version is they caused a pretty sizable stir, and a sustained one at that, in Hawaii, being thrown out of multiple bars, eventually arrested, having a restraining order issued against them by the couple that they were staying with on the island, though that was later dropped. There was later on an additional chair throwing incident since I made that video, but that was pretty much in line with what had been going on, and I didn't feel that it warranted a follow-up video. But this, yeah, okay, I kind of have to talk about this. Not because I want to, and because I really don't want to become a celebrity drama channel. I really do not. Rather, I need to do a follow-up because the angle at which I tend to view these things is from the impact on upcoming films and future projects. Now, by the end of the previous video, I stated my belief that while Miller was destined to be dropped from both the Fantastic Beasts and the DC movies franchises going forward, the films they'd appeared in wouldn't really be affected. In the case of Fantastic Beasts, The Secretions of Dumblebum, it was because that movie was only weeks away from release when all this happened. In the case of The Flash, even though that film still isn't due out until next year, I still predicted no changes because the filming and the editing was completely done, and it was only effects work that was left to be accomplished between now and the release. And between the cost of the movie, the fact that they would have had to basically reshoot the entire thing in order to try and recast Miller, and how much had already been lost over the years of development hell and how many false starts the thing had, I said that it wouldn't be worth it to Warner Brothers to sink any more money into the thing than was absolutely necessary. And inside sources from last month backed up my assertions on this. I mean, there's no doubt Warner Brothers really wanted Miller to stay out of trouble between now and the release so that they can hope people start to forget about the Hawaii stuff. But even if things went south, I had a hard time believing that would severely disrupt the plans. Well, the new allegations might just do it. Strap in for this one, folks. We have a lot to go over. So, earlier this month, Chase Iron Eyes and Sarah Jumping Eagle filed for a petition for a protective order for their child, who they claim has been living with Miller and whose safety they currently fear. Now, there's been a lot of reporting on this, and some of it has been pretty sloppy. There's been a lot of very eye-catching and provocative terms thrown around in news coverage. Terms like kidnapping and grooming. Now, before I get any further into this, I want to be really clear about something. I don't know what happened between the person we're going to be talking about and Ezra Miller. Nobody does. And therefore, I am not going to speculate on the accuracy of any of these allegations. I am going to be as plain as I can about what's been said while acknowledging some of the carelessness in the reporting that's been going on. What do I mean by that? Okay, well, take the fact that the individual in question, one Tokata Iron Eyes, has been referred to in some stories and even in headlines as a teenager. They are 18 years old, which is, yes, technically a teenager, but it also makes them legally an adult. And teenager as a word, it's used for people as young as 13. So do you see how that term, especially in a headline, is potentially misleading, even if it's technically accurate, because it has the potential to create an image in a reader's mind of someone a fair bit younger than is actually involved? Yeah, that's the kind of stuff I'm going to be pulling at a little bit as I go. Not because I'm trying to defend Ezra Miller, because I am more than fed up with them at this point, but rather because I firmly believe it is important to be accurate lest the facts get twisted up into something even more sensational than what they actually are. The facts, as I have been able to find them, are more than enough on their own. So, I need to establish a couple of things about Toccata Iron Eyes. First, I want to note it's possible that they're no longer going by that first name. I've seen several news outlets state that they now prefer the name Gibson. However, none of those outlets provided sourcing on that name, and I couldn't find anything on their admittedly rather sparse social media accounts about that. So I have referred to them as Toccata Iron Eyes because that's the best information I have, and if ultimately that proves to be inaccurate, I do apologize for it. Now, you may have noticed that I've been using they, them pronouns, and that part really isn't in dispute. Even the quotes that have emerged from the protective order petition that was written by their parents use they, them pronouns. And that petition also openly acknowledges that they identify as non-binary, queer, and gay. I could go off on how many outlets are using the wrong pronouns to refer to them, but I'm going to try and stay focused here. So a bit of background. Toccata Iron Eyes is a member of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, which you might recall made headlines back in 2016 when they protested the building of an oil pipeline through tribal lands, a battle which is still ongoing in the courts, by the way, as the tribe is continuing to fight against the now completed pipeline. But back in 2016, Iron Eyes was 12 years old and became actively involved in the protests, making headlines at the time and in later years becoming even more of an activist and meeting with Greta Thunberg. This is also allegedly the point at which Ezra Miller enters the picture. Miller, amongst other public figures, went to the Standing Rock protests in a show of support. Now, Miller is 11 years older than Iron Eyes, so they were 23 at the time that the two met. From there, they remained in touch, with Iron Eyes traveling, along with other members of the tribe, to the premiere of the first Fantastic Beasts film in 2017. Now, the petition claims that at that time, Miller attempted to share a bed with Iron Eyes, but was prevented from doing so by a chaperone. There isn't a lot of details that I've been able to find more than that. I really haven't had much luck nailing down precisely at what point Iron Eyes began living and traveling with Miller, but it appears to be following their dropping out of college last year, a college they've been attending for 2 years with alleged financial assistance from Miller. Now, Iron Eyes and their exact birthday is not public record, but given the year of birth that I have been able to find is listed as 2004, that would have made them 17 at the time that they dropped out of college, assuming that the date that I found is accurate, even though it's incomplete. Since that time, they've been traveling with Miller between London, Hawaii, New York, and Miller's residence in Vermont. And no, it's not a part of Vermont anywhere near me. Don't ask. Okay, so the petition for the protective order. I've alluded to a few things that are in it already, but I need to be really upfront about something. I haven't read the actual court document. I would very much like to, but I can't find it. It was issued by a tribal court. It's not publicly available. Now, clearly, some news outlets have gotten their hands on at least portions of it as they quote directly from it, but none have made whatever documentation they've managed to get their hands on viewable in its entirety. Well, I mean, it's also possible that with my ADHD, the thing is actually available somewhere super accessible and obvious, and I just can't think of it, but look, I did my best, okay? Now, this is also where I want to kind of pause and make a note of some other terms that have been appearing in news coverage that feel like they're being, let's go with employed a bit carelessly, kind of like how I mentioned with the term teenager. Firstly, there's the word grooming. Now, I'll have a bit more to say on this later on, but the main thing I want to bring up here is that, so far as I can tell, the word grooming doesn't appear anywhere in the petition. Now, you're probably asking, you just said you haven't read the thing because you can't find it. How do you know that? And you know what? Fair question. But here's the thing. I noticed in a lot of coverage that direct quotes from the petition were frequently pulled, things like the following. physically and emotionally abusing, cult-like and psychologically manipulative and controlling behavior. And statements like these would appear in quotations right next to the word grooming, but grooming was never in quotes. Now, being unable to read the whole thing myself, that may still be an accurate summation of accusations, since terms like sexual predatory behavior and patterns of corrupting a minor are put in quotes and therefore most likely appear in the petition. It just struck me as odd that the single most inflammatory term that shows up in most of these articles and is often in the headlines appears to be the wordings of news outlets and not of the actual petition. Hey, it's me from the editing phase. So something that I want to note here that I'm actually going to bring up again later, but I want to put it here as well, and it'll just be reiterated later. My issue is not with how accurate the term groomer is or isn't, especially at this point in time where, at the time that I'm recording this voiceover, we have had additional things come forward and additional allegations from another person, this time again a 12-year-old, which would indicate a pattern. So I'm not debating the accuracy of the term. My concern is with the use of the word specifically because of the manner in which it is currently being used as a weapon against queer people. And I know that no matter what I say, there are going to be a million people in my comments shouting at me, you should just call a groomer. But what I would point out is that even if all of this is true, the Daily Beast, which covered the latest allegations, in which I'll be touching on later on, they managed to discuss everything going on, be pretty thorough, and not once use that term, as it did not appear quoted or as any kind of summation of allegations. And no, I'm not trying to police people saying they can never use the word again. I'm saying that under the current climate, it frustrates me to see it become the go-to word at a time when it is being deployed so drastically against the entire queer population and trans people in particular, simply for political clout. I hope in future to see more caution used in its deployment, which has not been the case here. Now, some even less scrupulous outlets are putting terms like kidnapping in their headlines, and that wording doesn't really even appear to have standing as being a summation of the petition's accusations, so far as I can tell. There are no accusations of actual kidnapping. Instead, the parents are accusing Miller of brainwashing their child and to be controlling their decisions. And at this point, it's worth coming back to the issue of age, not just the age gap, but as noted, there's accusations of inappropriate behavior from times in which Iron Eyes was definitely a minor, but right now they're currently 18, which makes them legally an adult. Now, there appears to be a quirk in tribal law that makes them still under the legal guardianship of their parents, or at least that's what's being stated by Chase Iron Eyes, their father, who is an attorney. Now, not knowing how to even begin looking up tribal law and lacking the education needed to parse it, even if I could, I can't independently verify that myself, one way or the other. But that's why Iron Eyes' parents are filing this despite them being 18. So, the intention of the petition is to basically serve as a restraining order to keep Miller and Iron Eyes separated until a formal hearing on the matter can take place, which is currently set for a court date of July 12th. But then we get into the issue that at present, nobody's been able to locate Miller or Iron Eyes in order to serve them with the court documents, which that's probably where the kidnapping shows up in some reporting. But again, there's no formal accusation of that. And at time of recording, at least, this is not being investigated as a kidnapping. And now I get to drop in after having shot this to let you know about some of the additional things that have come out since. Now, at present, things haven't really changed in regards to Miller and Iron Eyes. However, there has now been an additional filing for a protective order for a completely new person. This happened in Massachusetts, filed by some parents on behalf of their 12-year-old. Now, none of the names have been released, nor should they be, that having been said. I'm not going to go through this aspect by aspect. I will put a link in the description to the Daily Beast article that covers it. What I will say at this point is that, much like with the protective order that I've been talking about so far, these are allegations. These have not been investigated by the police. That does not mean they did not happen. It just means that all we have right now is one side. However, That one side is incredibly consistent with the kind of stuff I've already been talking about both now and previously about Miller's behavior. And such things would appear to include an incredibly short fuse when it came to issues of race or gender, yelling at people that they didn't know. There's an accusation that they actually had a firearm on them in the house where this occurred. All that having been said, the actual protective order focuses on their what has been described as creepy interest in an, at the time, 11-year-old non-binary child. Miller did apparently return to the same house at a later date and did so without incident, but that really isn't relevant given the nature of the accusations in this complaint. So if both sets of allegations are mostly or entirely true, then yeah, we now have a pattern of predatory behavior from Miller, which doesn't really impact my assessments that I'm going to be doing for the remainder of this video, but it does lean things just even more strongly that there is no really good best case scenario in this. It's all bad. It's just a question of how bad. And one other thing I want to note, when comparing this to the protective order that I'm largely talking about here involving Iron Eyes, there is one major key difference. And that is the fact that, as I'm about to get into, there is some dispute from the person in question who actually claims they do not need protection. Here, in this case, the 12-year-old themselves has expressed fear and concern about what went on. So there is no miscommunication or garbled messaging from the people involved who are actually speaking out about this. And of course, Miller continues to elude authorities, so we have no idea what they have to say. And honestly, at this point, I don't think I want to hear it even when they start talking. Now, this is where things start to get really muddy. Oh, yeah, we still got a ways to go. Iron Eyes, whose parents have made it known doesn't carry a phone of their own, has made 2 public statements through their Instagram since the start of this. The first was a written statement in which they assert that they are not in danger, that Miller is a source of loving support and invaluable protection during a time when they were mourning the loss of a friend following their leaving college. They accuse their parents of betrayal, toxicity, transphobia. And they assert their autonomy, stating, "I am an adult and I deserve to feel authority in my own body." The authenticity of this statement was almost immediately brought into question, including by Sarah Jumping Eagle, their mother. That happened during an interview with the LA Times. Now, several days later, Iron Eyes then posted a short video on the same Instagram account, not providing much in the way of additional details, but asserting that the words which appeared in the statement were their own.
I'd like to clarify that they are, in fact, directly from me. Nobody is controlling my Instagram account.
If you're reading them, you might have noticed some of the comments on that video are trying to assess their competency or honesty in what they're saying, but as I do not know them and have no meaningful point of reference for their normal patterns of speech, I will not be indulging in any such speculation here. So, as I said, this muddies things a fair bit, since there are now public statements from the alleged victim who appears to want no part of their parents right now. And this is where I'm going to come as close to speculation as I'm comfortable. And I'm really only doing this to acknowledge what a mess of possible things there are at play. So, it's fairly easy from the perspective of the parents to claim that these statements were coerced in some way by Miller, as that pattern of behavior would very much be in line with the allegations in the petition. And if those allegations are accurate, it would make sense to question these statements and how much they can or should be trusted or believed. However, on the other side of things, if Iron Eyes' accusations of transphobia and psychological manipulation on the part of their parents are accurate, then it becomes a matter of a young adult struggling to be free of a controlling family. So to pick a specific point just to illustrate what a cluster this is, let's examine the accusation by Iron Eyes that their parents, or at least their father specifically, is transphobic. Now, as I mentioned before, the petition uses their correct pronouns and acknowledges the parents as understanding their child to be non-binary, queer, gay, which would seem to preclude the parents being transphobic. But then there's this bit that appears as a lifted quote from the petition. Ezra has decided that Tokata is non-binary transgender. It's sentences like that which make me really wish I had the full petition to try and get some context on that, because I really want to know precisely how Chase Iron Eyes distinguishes between non-binary, something he appears to accept, and non-binary transgender, something he's implying is being thrust onto his child by Miller and carries an inherent negative connotation. Oh, I should probably define some terms here. Okay, crash course. Non-binary is an umbrella term, a bit like transgender. It refers to not adhering to seeing oneself as being on the gender binary of either male or female. Now, the term non-binary is used as an identity in and of itself, but also as a spectrum upon which lies many more specific identities. And from a strict definition, it's not inaccurate to refer to non-binary as a transgender identity. By that, I mean transgender in the broadest sense means not identifying as the gender you were assigned at birth. It does not specifically mean only male to female or female to male, though those are among the most common and best known instances of being transgender. But simply put, nobody has non-binary as their assigned gender at birth. So anyone who identifies as non-binary can be said to have transitioned from their assigned gender to a non-binary identity. Not all would choose those words to describe themselves, but that is not inaccurate. And this is why Chase Iron Eyes distinguishing between non-binary and non-binary transgender is really kind of confusing to me, because I don't know what he's doing. If I were to hazard a guess, it's possible that it's meant to imply that Iron Eyes is or is intending in the future to undergo transitional treatment, like, say, hormones or surgeries, which some, but not all, non-binary people do opt to do in some form or another. But honestly, regardless of the specific meaning of the distinction and what he meant by it, from the limited context we have, it does appear that their parents are framing transgender in the negative, even though they are supportive, apparently, of non-binary. So it's possible that Iron Eyes had a non-binary identity that their parents were supportive of, but has since begun a journey beyond the limits of their parents' comfort. And if that is the case, there is a chance transphobia may be mixed in with genuine concern on the part of the parents. Add to the mix that the parents have apparently attempted to obtain guardianship over Iron Eyes before and have been largely blocked by an inability to serve papers properly. So, bit of a pattern there. The parents also claim to have conducted a wellness visit in Santa Monica, during which Sarah Jumping Eagle, that's Iron Eyes' mother, claims to have been assaulted by Miller, with an incident report allegedly being filed. That's another document I couldn't find publicly available records for. There's also accusations in the petition of providing Iron Eyes with drugs such as marijuana and LSD, which would fit with the cult-like accusation. But then again, if Iron Eyes' statement is true, those are also the kind of accusations that are really easy to pile on with little evidence, especially given Miller's previous arrest for marijuana possession. Additionally, the parents note that, quote, if anybody questions Ezra's actions, they say they're being racist or transphobic. I'm not entirely sure where the racism enters into it, unless they meant anti-Semitic, as Miller is of Jewish descent on their father's side. But on the idea of accusing anyone they don't like of transphobia, that is a tactic that does exist, although not employed nearly as often as some culture critics would claim. But from another angle, it's also a known tactic to preemptively claim someone will just shout transphobia when confronted, so that any actual transphobia can't be called out without the people doing the call out being brought into immediate question. Nearly everything that's known or has been stated by either party can be viewed to fit an opposing narrative without much effort. And it pretty much all centers around who people choose to assume is more truthful, Iron Eyes or their parents. And I have absolutely no way of knowing how much of, if any, of these possible views or scenarios are true. That's even before we get into the fact that even if Iron Eyes is truthful in their assessment of their parents, it's still at best extremely eyebrow-raising, if not deeply concerning, that this reprieve from an allegedly bad home life happened at the hands of someone 11 years their senior, who's been in their social orbit since they were 12, and has a history of disruptive and at times violent behavior, it's not impossible for Miller to be the safe harbor that Iron Eyes is claiming them to be. But it's kind of hard right now to just assume that to be the case, especially when the two of them can't even be found to receive their court documents. Which brings us firmly and finally back to Ezra Miller. Now, going forward, I am going to shift focus because I know I had a lot to cover as far as the petition, the response, and all that freaking mess. But from here out, I'm talking about what I really want to focus on now that the context is out of the way. What the hell happens next as far as public image for Miller and the release of The Flash goes? And no, to the asshats in the comments, that doesn't mean that I care more about a movie release than the safety of a human. It means that this is supposed to be a geeky pop culture channel, and I'm frankly more comfortable speculating on the actions of a soulless corporation than on those of human beings. I hope for the safety of all involved. I shouldn't have to state that plainly, but I will. I hope, whatever the truth is, it becomes clearer and that all are extricated from any unhealthy situations they may have been in the past or may be in now. Okay? Okay. So the reason I couldn't ignore this, despite really hating drilling down into people's lives the way these things always necessitate, is because this is the one thing that I can think of, other than maybe an accusation of homicide, that might actually force Warner Brothers to alter its plans for The Flash. Now, as I said before, the amount of money that's been sunk into this already means it's going to be an uphill battle to truly turn a profit. And that was before any of this started. As a result, Warner Brothers is going to be extremely reluctant to throw any more money at this thing than they already have. You know, understanding that they're still going to have to throw the standard marketing costs at it. I mean, heck, the issues in Hawaii probably already meant the company wasn't going to be safe being able to send Miller out on press junkets because a big chunk of the questions would be about their legal troubles instead of the movie. Any company would be reluctant to spend any more money than they have to. And trying to remove Miller, be it by reshooting the entire film from scratch or even trying to replace them digitally, would drive up the cost of this already very expensive movie by quite a bit and push back the release date by at least another year, probably more. Yet, at the same time, they've sunk far too much money into this to just mothball the thing and write it off. If they don't release it, they can't recoup any of it. And the pressure is even greater than it would be otherwise due to the recent merger between Warner Brothers and Discovery. Shakeups, restructurings, and even firings are extremely common during these kinds of transitions. The head of Warner Brothers Picture Group is already being replaced, and this is absolutely the worst time for an arm of the studio, like the DC movies, to appear to be badly managed or in shambles. So the question becomes, what's worse? Risking the release of a film where the star actor stands accused of just about the worst thing possible for a family tentpole film? Or spending potentially millions, tens of millions, maybe even over 100 million more dollars trying to scrub them from the project and virtually guaranteeing that the movie will never be able to make its money back, or just write the entire thing off now before another penny gets thrown at a sinking ship. And honestly, I don't know what the best option is. This already messy situation also has a rather nasty political edge to it, even beyond the usual rage merchants shouting wokeness at any casting that isn't a cis straight white dude with a perfect jawline. Because, in case you hadn't noticed, groomer has become the current buzzword among the far right when it comes to referring to the LGBTQIA+ community and to anything related to trans people in particular, which, again, it may well be an accurate summation of the allegations, but that specific word is being used as a weapon right now. And having it looming over the star of a major film means that if Warner Brothers does nothing, a significant political force will accuse the entire organization of shielding predators, something that has been a genuine Hollywood issue, as the Me Too movement has shown in recent years. But then again, Warner Brothers has extremely fresh memories of making a call before things were fully played out and then having that bite them in the ass in terms of public opinion with the dismissal of Johnny Depp from the third Fantastic Beasts film and the retaining of Amber Heard for the second Aquaman. And there's a debate to be had over how likely an actual boycott would be to happen at all and how impactful it would be if it did happen. And that's a debate which will not be had here. Thank you very much. But regardless, all of this is bad press. It just creates more and more negative feelings toward Miller directly and The Flash by association. Warner Brothers is really in a no-win situation here. I mean, barring a miracle like Miller and Iron Eyes being found and the parents dropping the petition and everybody involved publicly stating, it's okay, everything's fine. And since I'm not expecting that to happen, what I am expecting is one of two things. Either Warner Brothers will act pretty quickly to the point that I may end up having to add a supplementary material to this after I film it, or they will drag their feet for months. Basically, it depends on how willing the people making the decisions are to bite the bullet and take the blame for the fallout. And to be clear, usually people at the executive level are pretty reluctant to do that. If the decision is made that this whole thing just keeps getting worse and they need to pull the plug before the next disaster, if there's any decision like that made, I expect the announcement within the next week to come and confirm that there's a delay, or maybe even that the movie is skipping theatrical altogether and it's being dumped on HBO Max, which would help it avoid the expense of a theatrical run and the associated marketing push. And if that happens, also expect a pretty swift change of management over the DC film properties, because making that call would basically be an admission that they gave up trying to fix it. Failing that, I think Warner Brothers is going to stall for as long as they think they can get away with, in a desperate hope that things either get better or at least go quiet. It's still about a year away from the current release date for The Flash. They may honestly hold out in desperate hope that the headlines will stop maybe by August, and then they'll plan the marketing campaign around emphasizing everything other than Ezra Miller. So expect Michael Keaton to be put front and center, and for any other hidden or surprise appearances to get spoiled and used in marketing in an attempt to reclaim the conversation. Because it's pretty rare for executives to admit defeat, if there's even a sliver of a chance things might still work out. I mean, you can just look at Netflix pretending everything was fine for over a year and only admitting to being in trouble when it became literally impossible to hide that fact. You can check out my video on that mess if you need a refresher on any of that. As for Ezra Miller, I mean, they're pretty much done at this point. I never believed for a second that Warner Brothers would keep them on past this one Flash film that was already shot, even before this whole mess happened. From a PR standpoint, Miller is radioactive, not just because of what they're alleged to have done, but because the headlines don't stop coming. I mean, honestly, you'd be surprised the scandals that can be recovered from, so long as the person in question keeps their head down and stays out of trouble for long enough and doesn't generate any new headlines. And Miller seems utterly incapable of that at this point. Right now, the only real question is whether or not jail is in their future. And that, if it happens, may not even have anything to do with this petition, because remember, this isn't an arrest warrant, it's a restraining order. These allegations are not currently part of a criminal complaint. That said, there's still lingering fallout from everything that went on in Hawaii. I don't think that's finished playing out yet. And a criminal investigation spawning from this protective order isn't out of the question, especially if Miller and Iron Eyes fail to appear in court. Now, I expect more stuff will come out in the coming days and weeks, and to be clear, I have absolutely no plans to keep on top of it all. I tackled this one because of how it impacts The Flash, because geek media is what I'm actually here to talk about. I know I spent more time talking about the protective order and the people involved in it, but I really feel that all the context was necessary given how shallow a lot of the takes out there are right now. But until Warner Brothers makes whatever its next move ends up being, don't expect me to jump on every little drip of new information and fresh allegations that comes out about Ezra Miller. I'm not going to say that I don't care, but I am going to say I really do not want to talk about it anymore unless I absolutely have to. And I felt I had to this time. But what are your thoughts on any of this absolute mess? Please remember to refrain from personal attacks. That includes against me, Miller, Iron Eyes, their parents, or even the people at Warner Brothers. No personal attacks, please. I know this is a lot that I've gone over, and people probably have very strong opinions. And that's fine. Just be respectful when you express them. If you can adhere to that, drop something down in the comments and let's talk about it. Patreon is what pays my bills and allows me to dedicate an entire day to researching and shooting and editing this. And also on Patreon, you get early access to videos like this one and can see them ahead of everybody else. But even if you can't support me on Patreon, there's a bunch of links to other stuff I do. There is merch, including Pride merch, as well as books I've written and all this other stuff. But what I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. All right, I've got thanks to give for my Patreon supporters. Robin Moore, Zubin Fala, Tarak, The Thing That Goes Doink in the Anime, Oliver B., Linda Walters, Emu Delki, The Oath of Boyd, TT, Fernobulax the Poodle, Zach, Idolin, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Toku BL Huvian, Adam RDL Taylor, Shane Ross, Shayla Gourlay, and Brendan LaRose. The Rats and I thank you.